Welcome to Story Planet, where we bring you relaxing tales to help you unwind. Tonight's story is A Cabin Christmas Surprise. So, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself be carried away into a world of peace and warmth. Now, let's begin. High up in the snowy mountains, hidden amongst the pines, sat a rustic little cabin that seemed to belong to another time. The cabin, with its smoke curling from the chimney and frosted windows glowing softly with golden light, was home to Margaret and her husband Harold. The couple had lived here for over a decade, retreating to the serene mountains after years of busy city life. It had been Harold's dream to leave behind the noise and chaos for a simpler existence, and together they had built this peaceful haven. Their faithful golden retriever, Rusty, completed their little family. It was Christmas Eve, and the mountains were silent except for the soft hush of falling snow. Inside the cabin, Margaret sat in her favorite chair by the fire, knitting a scarf in deep red yarn, while Harold tended to the fire, adding a fresh log to keep the warmth steady. The scent of freshly baked ginger cookies mingled with the piney aroma of the Christmas tree they had decorated earlier. "It's quiet this year," Harold said, settling into his chair opposite Margaret. His voice carried a note of melancholy as he gazed at the twinkling tree lights. "I miss the laughter and chatter we used to have when the kids were young." Margaret looked up from her knitting, her eyes soft with understanding. "I do too," she admitted. "But I'm grateful for this quiet time with you. It's a different kind of Christmas, but it's still special." Harold nodded, a small smile lifting his weathered face. "You're right, and who knows? Maybe the mountains have a surprise for us this year." Margaret chuckled. "In this weather, I think it'll just be us and Rusty. No one else would venture up here in a storm like this." As if on cue, Rusty's ears perked up, and he trotted to the door, letting out a soft bark. Both Margaret and Harold exchanged curious glances. "What is it, boy?" Harold asked, rising from his chair. He opened the door a crack, and the faint sound of footsteps crunching in the snow reached their ears. Margaret stood, her knitting forgotten on the armrest. "Who could it possibly be?" she murmured, as Harold pulled the door open wider. Outside, a man and a woman stood on the porch, shivering and dusted with snow. Behind them, the faint outline of a car could be seen stuck in a snowdrift at the edge of the clearing. "I'm so sorry to bother you," the man began, his voice thick with exhaustion. "We were on our way to visit family, but the storm caught us off guard. Our car is stuck, and we saw the light from your cabin." Margaret's concern melted into warmth as she stepped forward. "Oh, you poor things. Come in, please. It's far too cold to be out here." Harold stepped aside, and the couple hurried in, their breath still visible in the warm air. The woman, clutching a bundle wrapped in blankets, nodded gratefully. "Thank you so much. We didn't know what we were going to do." Rusty wagged his tail excitedly, sensing new friends, as Margaret and Harold quickly fetched blankets and ushered the couple toward the hearth. As the couple settled in, Margaret and Harold learned their names were Daniel and Marie. They had been traveling to spend Christmas with Marie's parents in the next town over when the storm had forced them off the road. Marie unwrapped the bundle in her arms to reveal a baby no more than a few months old, his cheeks rosy from the cold. "This is Oliver," she said softly, her voice filled with love. Margaret's heart swelled as she looked at the tiny child. "Well, little Oliver, you've brought quite the Christmas surprise to our cabin." Harold chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "I told you the mountains might have a surprise in store for us, didn't I?" Margaret quickly set about making their unexpected guests comfortable. Extra blankets were fetched from a cedar chest, and Harold stoked the fire until it roared with cheerful warmth. "You must be starving," Margaret said, pulling out bowls and ladling the creamy potato soup into each. She placed thick slices of warm bread on plates, alongside a small dish of her homemade herb butter. "It's nothing fancy, but it should warm you up." Daniel took a bite and sighed. "This is incredible. It tastes like Christmas in a bowl." Marie smiled as she fed Oliver from a bottle. "Thank you for this. It's been such a long day, and this is exactly what we needed." Margaret beamed. "Well, there's dessert, too. A berry pie just came out of the oven, and if you're still hungry after that, there are plenty of cookies to go around." Margaret showed the couple to a small but cozy guest room with a bed layered in warm quilts and soft pillows. "It's not much, but it's warm and should help you get a good night's sleep," she said, lighting a bedside lamp that gave the room a golden glow. "It's perfect," Marie said, her voice full of gratitude. "Thank you for everything." As the couple settled in, Harold and Margaret shared a quiet moment by the fire, sipping tea and reflecting on the unexpected turn of their Christmas Eve. "It feels good to have company," Harold said. "It's warmer with their presence." Margaret smiled. "It is. Christmas always feels better when it's shared." The next morning was Christmas Day. Snow lay heavy on the trees, sparkling in the morning light. Margaret and Harold prepared a special breakfast of fluffy pancakes topped with freshly whipped cream and a drizzle of maple syrup. They sat together at the table, sharing stories of Christmases past. Oliver gurgled happily in his mother's lap, and Rusty lay by the fire, his tail thumping lazily. The cabin glowed with life as the day unfolded. Margaret prepared roasted vegetables and a savory pie, while Marie helped make a salad with the last of the winter greens Margaret had grown in her small greenhouse. As the scent of the meal filled the cabin, Daniel offered to split some firewood to repay their kindness. Harold joined him outside, and the rhythmic sound of the axe cutting through wood added a comforting backdrop to the warm day. Inside, Margaret and Marie sat by the fire, chatting softly. Marie shared stories of her own childhood Christmases, and Margaret listened intently, adding her own tales of snowy mornings and festive gatherings. The women found an easy camaraderie, one built on the shared magic of the season. That evening, they all gathered around the tree. Harold, ever the storyteller, began recounting one of his favorite Christmas memories, a tale of how he and Margaret had once gotten lost in a snowstorm not unlike this one, only to find shelter in a stranger's barn. "That was the moment I knew we could handle anything," Harold said, his eyes twinkling as he glanced at Margaret. Marie leaned against Daniel, her heart full. "It's amazing how moments like these bring people together," she said softly. The storm had left the roads impassable, And it wasn't until the day after Christmas that Daniel and Harold were able to dig the car out and clear a path to the road. Margaret packed them a basket of provisions for their journey, sandwiches, cookies, and a jar of her homemade jam. "We can't thank you enough for your hospitality," Daniel said as he shook Harold's hand. "You've made this Christmas unforgettable for us." Margaret crouched to say goodbye to Oliver, who cooed and waved his tiny hands. "You've brought so much joy to our Christmas," she said softly. "Travel safely, and may your journey be blessed." As the car disappeared down the snowy road, Margaret and Harold stood on the porch with Rusty by their side. They lingered for a moment, watching the clearing grow quiet again. Harold turned to Margaret, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. "That was one Christmas I'll never forget," he said. Margaret smiled, her heart full. "Neither will I. It's a reminder that even in the most unexpected moments, there's magic to be found." And as they stepped back inside, the glow of the tree and the crackle of the fire seemed to promise many more joyful Christmases to come. Thank you for joining us on Story Planet. If you felt like you were nestled in the cozy warmth of Margaret and Harold's cabin, surrounded by the magic of Christmas, consider giving a thumbs up. And if the story brought you peace and calm, feel free to share it with friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe for daily stories from Story Planet, offering serene escapes every day. Wishing you a peaceful night and a relaxed sleep. Sweet dreams.